That's perfect. Yes. Great to see you. Ed, thank you for allowing me to join your podcast conversation. Definitely. So I'm the National Director of Sales at Biobeat. We are launching the first and only FDA cleared cuffless blood pressure monitor for the 24-hour blood pressure test. It's kind of a unique product. What really kind of inspired me to join Biobeat is really pretty straightforward. That hypertension, it's the number one risk factor for cardiovascular disease. Nearly 120 million adults in the US suffer from high blood pressure. And even according to the American Heart Association, 74% of those people are uncontrolled. So huge unmet need in one of the largest patient populations in cardiovascular care. So it was exciting for that point. But then even beyond that, you look at it, it's a class 1A recommendation, or the test is a class 1A recommendation by the American Heart Association, and the ACC hypertension guidelines. There's existing reimbursement. So, the market is set, but that traditional cuff-based 24-hour monitor, it's rarely used. It's cumbersome. Patient compliance is terrible. They don't want to wear it. Missing data, physicians don't like it because it kind of leads to misdiagnosis because of huge gaps of data. So, what was needed was a disruptive technology to come in. So Biobeat. And so that alone is just the opportunity that we have to really kind of change that curve of healthcare for these patients is really remarkable. So if you're not going to put on a cuff, you're going to be put on, you can see it right here. It's just a patch that patients will wear on their chest for 24 hours. It connects to an app on their phone. Exciting. We actually just launched a digital diary feature. So a lot of doctors, when they do have them take a blood pressure measurements over, even if it's serial measurements over 2 weeks, they want the patient to write a diary, maybe what time they took their medication, if they had any symptoms, if they exercised, different things that they want to track. So that's all built into our platform now. So the patient on their phone can list, I took my beta blocker at 7 a.m. or, I went for a long walk at noon. But now in the report, it's going to have a timestamp of when those events occurred, and then you get to see what the effects were. So again, really actionable data now is going to be available for the physicians. Well, so I will say, we are specific to blood pressure and heart rate. So when you look at the test and how CMS, reimburses, they just want what's specifically in that CPT code. And honestly, there are a lot of great cardiac monitors out there that are available. You look at iRhythm, Preventus, Bardy, I guess, now Baxter. But, there's a lot of technology out there for cardiac monitoring. There is not good technology, or there hasn't been, for blood pressure. And, hence one of the reasons why 74% of those 120 million patients are uncontrolled. So again, kind of ripe for disruptive technology to come in and help. And Biobeat's the first one to be able to figure it out, to have a FDA cleared device for that test. Well, yes, there's certainly, just like any other adhesive patch where we want good signal. Yes, you have to do a little shave, clean the site. But what we get feedback from patients love, especially if they've done a traditional cuff-based ABPM, they look at this as being just so easy. It's a set it and forget it. They sleep with it. There's no indication when it takes the measurement. So all in all, it is that next step in the evolution of monitoring blood pressure. So yes, even with the pacemaker, fascinating. Also, we have, or I shouldn't say the technology has been utilized in 26 clinical publications to date. The most recent was a study that was published by the Mayo Clinic through the Nature's Journal of Human Hypertension. And that was in a ICU setting, and it was essentially looked at and compared to A-line. And so, what even the FDA considers the gold standard for blood pressure, the device showed the amount of data was remarkable. But in the study that they published, there's between 85 to 92,000 measurements, and the Biobeat device was 96 to 99% in agreement to the measurement on a beat by beat basis, which equates to a little bit less than 1 millimeter mercury on average difference than the A line. So extremely accurate, very robust validation. That is a fabulous point, and that's kind of where we think the future really lies. Is not just identification or screening or diagnosis of hypertension, but truly the management of hypertension. And so when you look at, just as you described, the challenge that physicians have is they're I hate to say they're making their best guess, very educated guess, but they're making their best guess of how to best treat that patient. Now with this data, they can actually see what the effects were. And so they may find out maybe they're over medicating the patient, and maybe they can come back. Or maybe, to your point, maybe the patient isn't taking the medication at the right time of day. The very interesting study in the Lancet published a couple of years ago, large 60,000 patients, but it was looking at the cuff-based measurement or an office-based measurement and the 24-hour blood pressure report and the risk of all-cause death and cardiovascular death. And really interesting, not surprising, 24 hours is more informative, but amazingly, the nighttime blood pressure, that nocturnal blood pressure, was 6 times more informative on that patient's risk for cardiovascular death. So again, if they're doing serial measurements at home with a standard cuff, they're never going to take it while they're sleeping. That you're exactly right, because you'll have, there's a half-life to that medication. No, but that's where this information is really, truly valuable. It was someone that I've worked with in the past, a recruiter that had been working with Biobeat, really did the introduction. And, the nice thing is, since we both have worked with each other in the past, there's that level of trust and understanding of, who is a good fit for these opportunities. And so it was, Mike Moore with the Mullings Group, someone who has a good presence on LinkedIn. They build teams that people don't realize what they do. Yes. Yes. No, and there's a big difference between the ones that really work for it and are skilled at what they do versus ones that just generate a lot of resumes. Yeah. Yes. Well, so I do want to preface that, I was kind of that borderline talent. I was good enough to get an opportunity, was a free agent with the Kansas City Chiefs, had some minor injuries, went on injury reserve with KC, did NFL Europe that following season, had my little cup of tea in Nashville, but then at that point decided, I was the likelihood of me, having a successful career. And I look at, you need to make it at least 4 years for it to make it worthwhile. And I just thought, my body was taking a beating, and I'll probably talk a little about that as well soon, but decided to get a real job. And I knew I had more to give than just that physical. No, not really. More on the college side. I went to University of Northern Iowa. No, Kurt Warner was my most famous teammate. But we had guys from the time I was there that had played significant time in the NFL. It's interesting on at that level what the effects of injuries to talent. And there's some correlation to what we do, in building culture and teams. But when you have certain individuals that you count on and are part of that core culture, that core team, when they're gone, they're missed. And you can get people to fill in, but it's just not quite the same. And those holes are very, they're very visible because talent in the NFL is high, and it does not take much to, from the number one team to the last team in the league. That whole any given Sunday is true. There's yeah. Well, so if you think about the, the oh yeah, the hard part is just the production value that they have today versus back. But in terms of like setting the standard and kind of setting that criteria of what counts for a great sports movie, that one is definitely one of the greats. No, you're probably not wrong. I'm amazed at the people that were you used to be Kansas City fans, but are now kind of turned off just by that attention. And I get it, but yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon for a NFL football team and just the whole NFL in terms of the number of fans that they generated just because of that. Oh, yes. Yes. Oh, yes. Well, yeah, no, yeah, yeah, I have some, I laughed at that, some of the potential music or movies that we'll talk about. You know, so there's, I think, great lessons, and it's all about how you frame it. What you're willing to learn from these lessons. And I'll just say, I've had friends that they went into depression after their football career is over because they tied so much into it. Where I looked at it more, you get to see the difference between of what the elite do to be elite, because at that level, everyone has talent, and yes, there are physically gifted individuals that are far and above others. But if those that just rely on that talent, they burn out quick. They only may make it a couple of years in the NFL, just because they don't put in the time and effort. The ones that separate themselves are the ones that are going in. Even though I look at Derek Thomas. He passed away actually the off season after I was there in that the 98, 99 off season. But he was one where he would come in and do film study, and he would work on the cues and finding the little things that he could identify in the offensive lineman or the snap count from the other team to be able to almost move with the ball and just get a step faster than what they would not. I remember that first game that season he had against the Raiders. He had 6 sacks in the first game, and everyone, I think at that point, I think it was a shutout. I laugh because honestly, that was the year the wheels fell off for Kansas City. But after that first game, they were already talking, oh, they're going to shut out the entire season. Just all these kind of ridiculous things. But the amount of effort that he put in to be even that much better, I think that's the indication. That's the same thing. The 10,000 hours to become the expert. The effort that you need to put into becoming an expert in whatever you do, it pays off if you put it in. Yes, that's right. That's another record. Yes, you got to have some grit to make it. So I really do love health and fitness. I dedicate a lot of time to my kids. As most fathers do. I have one out of school, one in high school, one in middle school, and they definitely keep me busy. But health and fitness is something that is always been a passion of mine. At one time I was 320 pounds. Was oh yeah, that was my biggest. I was. Yeah, I was 6'4", about 6'4", and oh, well, the NFL takes it away too. They try to shrink you. They want to make you, they want to reduce your value as much as they can. I laugh at that. Defensive tackle and those. So in college, I was a linebacker. In high school and college, linebacker, loved linebacker. I had a back injury that, later on, then I had to do some things to fix that. But I missed the season. And when I came back, they said, "Hey, need help in the defensive line. Would you be willing?" I'm a team player. I said, "Yeah, that's what's best for the team. Let's do it." But I would have rather played defensive end. I thought that would have been a better match, but I think, yeah, exactly. Well, and but so that, I look at, if I could find a way. I remember even in college and shortly thereafter, I kind of had this idea of, and you're starting to see them where, they're these all-encompassing health complexes where they have medical, they have gyms, they have, these med spas that have different treatment, but it's kind of this all-in-one, idea of you're really trying, called a, longevity health club. But that's at one time, that's kind of what I thought would be really interesting to do. Yeah. That's, yep. Yes. So, honestly, the biggest thing is work on building patience. A lot of things in my life growing up were actually really easy. Grades were easy. School was easy. Athletically, I had good success. I think you get used to that instant gratification. And, you know, and I'll be the first to admit, earlier in my career, I jumped jobs way too often, kind of chasing that next thing. And, I think if any strong advice, be patient, build a foundation, and build that career brick by brick where you're at. And I think that goes a long ways to having a truly remarkable career if you can build that. Now, granted, Biobeat's the seventh startup I've worked for, and so I've had a lot of fun doing that as well. A lot of those are learning lessons, but that's honestly my biggest advice I would give is build patience. I've had a couple decent, none where it's I'm retiring. I'm still that's Biobeat. Biobeat is going to be that for me, but no. So this is the size of it. Yep. Yep. Yeah, so it is not that big. Typically worn on the left side, but there's spatial invariance, so you can actually wear it on either side. If they have a pacemaker or an ICD, you can put it on the contralateral side. I laugh. So honestly, probably one of the first ones I definitely would bring, simply because it was the very first cassette tape I got when I had my first boom box. As a kid, Fritz Smith is Billy Joel. I absolutely love Billy Joel. Just enjoy. All. So okay, what an incredible song! I love that song. So the cassette tape that I got was Innocent Man, And I think I could probably, sing that entire album word for word. But honestly, if I could take the greatest hits with me, I would take the greatest hits because there's so many. I did see that. Yes. Yes. The some of those, the inside look of what was going on at different times, it really kind of, you get a different view of what those people, who those people are, and what made them to be what they are. And yes, exactly. Yes. So, I need something to work out. And again, since I have a limited quantity, I'm probably going towards like Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. Just, you know, historically, a lot of memories for me growing up. So that's one that, hey, it's still, for me, it's still, flips that switch pretty good. So yeah. Hey, fantastic. No, exactly. So that's probably, one, or the second one. Then if from there, probably, I enjoy. I played string bass for the orchestra for about 8.5 years, I think, growing up. So, yeah. So I love classical music too, and I don't know, like Taco Bell is one that is, yeah, just what a enjoyable. Yep. Oh yeah. There's so many great songs. So that one, to pick out one, or maybe I could get a compilation of classical music. But then, then I'm probably, if I'm going to switch over, got to have some entertainment for movies as well. I always think of, you got to have something that, maybe is inspiring, has some humor, has some depth to it. But the one that I always love, well, very close. Chariots of Fire is one for uh, the inspiration of accomplishing, some great things is that I find it still to be, give me chills when uh, not well. I'll tell you. So the funny one that I actually would want, because it is kind of this fantastical, desert island esque in terms of being stranded. The Flash Gordon, with Ming the Ruler, and just a fun and great music. Oh, I am. It's kind of funny because they've gotten so incredibly big and spread. But I grew up on Marvel and DC, growing up, and loved reading the comic books. But so the I laugh. I don't even know. I think all my comics they've been moved on to one of my other nieces or nephew at some point. But I always wanted to, go back and read. All right, because it's funny, some of these stories that they put in the movies, like I had that comic, or that came from a comic that I had, back when I was, 8 years old or whatever it was. Oh, I was at stacks and stacks of Mad Magazine. Alfred E. Newman. Yes. Yes. It's my childhood. Let me have it. That's right. That's Well, so I kind of laugh. Like I said, Biobeat is the seventh startup that I've worked for. I have three artificial discs in my spine. I have my first one I had to get myself into a clinical trial. One, just to get it paid for, because lumbar is not easy to get covered. I have a wedge of composite bone in my right leg. I've had multiple elbow surgeries. I'm not sure if there's a risk I haven't liked. So I kind of jump in, head first on a lot of this stuff. So I want to keep going. I want to keep moving. But, I think I've not skydived, and, not really, I wouldn't be against it. If someone said, here, let's go skydiving, I would go. I, I bungee jumped long ago. But yeah, I've done, I do like, hiking and some trails that are a little sketchy sometimes, but, a lot of fun there. I've had 5 different motorcycles, even had a crash. I've had a head on crash on one. I had, let's see, I had 2 fat boys. Oh yeah. I've had, not had any Indians. I had a V-Rod for a while. I had a Hayabusa. That's a very fast bike. And then so it's a Kawasaki Hayabusa. One time, I don't know if it still is, but it was the fastest motorcycle in production. Um, too much bike. And I'm that way too fast. Well into the triple digits on that bike. Uh, but a Buell that was another really fun little sport bike. That was a one that was connected to Harley for a long time. But yeah, motorcycles. But probably the biggest risk I think is really I've had a few times in my career where I've had to start from scratch and kind of rebuild. Sometimes digging out of a hole that I dug myself, but now kind of have that patience and fortitude to rebuild and believe in myself that I'm going to get this done. So there's a lot of things I like in my life. So I always go back to there's lessons I've learned that I wish I would have known about or could tell myself just because maybe I could be ahead of what I am today. But honestly, I find it hard to say I would change anything because who knows what the butterfly effect could be in terms of where I am today. So I have a hard time saying I would change anything. Yeah, certainly I wish I didn't have to learn certain things the way I have maybe at times, but in the big picture, I can't say that I would truly change anything just for the fact that I have no idea where that would put me today. So, we're really kind of building the team from scratch here at Biobeat. And so, a lot of it is building a culture and building processes here. And because, I think one thing is, and I learned this so many, almost everything I use and we learned from our mentors, our other leaders, our managers that we've had in the past. One of the things I really like that one of my former directors we used to say is he wants to build an organization that people are fighting to get into versus one that people are fighting to get out of. And I've been on a lot people are fighting to get out of. And so that, I want people to be excited about being on the team, knowing, hey, we have a lot of hard work to do and this isn't easy, but at the same time, we're a team, we're looking out for each other. We're all in this together, from the CEO to the janitors. We're all trying to do the same thing is build a successful company. And so, yep. Yes. Oh, yes, exactly. Well, our CEO, the first year, he was he was the sales rep. Yep. Yeah. Yes. Yes. That's the hard part because I think that's what people think. You just get talent, and talent is going to win. And no, there's a lot of work to actually get that talent to work together to all be singing from the same song sheet, all be working, rowing in the same direction. There's yes, it's you're right. It is one where it's all, and this is what we hear all the time. Well, if it's easy, everyone would be doing this, for everyone would be selling this. So it is. Yes. Oh, yes. I'll tell you what, kudos to you, because I do know I am going through, I shouldn't say I am, but Biobeat is going through at least two processes with customers where they're using Sensinet as their IT, pretty good process. Yeah, no, definitely. So it's funny, I didn't realize that until after we talked. And so I looked up Sensinet. I was like, wait a second. And, you know, yeah, nope, no, definitely. It's, I appreciate that. Yes. No, I think it has to do with just standing behind some principles, right? I think a lot of companies have great principles and great, guiding characteristics, but sometimes do they really embody them? Do they really live them on a daily? I think that's the difference between the companies that, again, build cultures that people want to be a part of versus want to get out of. And so that's my hope, is that I can, again, I got to hold my team accountable. I got to be held accountable. But at the end of the day, is if, one, they're going to appreciate that. And if I'm there showing that, hey, I want to help you be successful, I want to help you grow. I want to, there was one thing I think I've had good success in my career is I've had a lot of people get promoted from underneath me. I like to recognize the success that my team is having, not the success that I had with my team. I want to see people, I've even had a couple of people that they wanted to get a job that was outside the company. And I said, well, hey, I hate to lose you, but if that's really what you want to do, let me help. Maybe I know the manager over there. Maybe I can just give you some advice on how to position yourself. And I've had people that have gotten their career, their dream job that way. And then I've had others that were unhappy on the team that they were on. And I said, well, the company doesn't want to lose you. Let's just find another place for you that is allowing you to, level up your skill set and still be able to provide, value to the company. And so I've had some good success doing that as well. It's funny. At one time, if I go back maybe 15 years ago, I used to say, oh, I want to build my career towards, maybe being a CEO someday. And I really changed that just for the fact that there's a lot of things that happen and change and, come in line that may or may not ever make that happen. So I just changed to be, I want to be a strong commercial leader. I just want to be someone that builds good teams and helps people find ways to succeed. So if I can help, I I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yes. Oh yeah, that's right. The little mannequin, our Biobeat Bill, I think is. I think that's something that, yeah. Yep. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yes. So, the biggest thing is find those opportunities and find those mentors that are willing to talk to you. It can be frustrating because there's a lot of us that we, get a lot of inquiries and we get a lot of people reaching out, and we're all so busy that sometimes we don't give them the time. But there are those out there that they may just be a sales rep, they may be a manager, they may be a director, they may be, a clinical, but they're going to be willing to talk. You got to put yourself out there. You got to do the effort to reach out and tell them you want to learn. You want to find out, more about what they do in their job. What are the things that they did to get to where they are? What advice they may have. I think just that is a big thing. And then, start, following the different industries and companies that you want to get into. Learn about the new technology. If you can, find a way to get into a conference, even if it's, just buying a visitor badge, attendee badge, just to be able to get into the exhibit hall, go around the booths, talk to the different people at the booths. It is one of those, like, it's not anything that's going to really truly move the needle in terms of, but the more you do that, the more knowledge you have of where those opportunities lie. Because what you're going to find is there are companies that do look at truly that entry level sales rep position or sales associate position that are straight out of college, that do not have necessarily a career building opportunity that they've already been in, that they want to say, no, we want good young talent that we can build ourselves. So finding those companies, and the more you network, the more you're going to all of a sudden, just these little opportunities are going to start popping up. I think, honestly, even though Mike more a recruiter, it was more of a connection through my network that allowed that to happen versus, a recruiter reaching out to me. It was because it's been a network that's been warm for 15 years. And, it's something that a lot of conversations are even, hey, Jay, I had this opportunity, do you know of anyone? It is that kind of relationship where it wasn't always that, he only reaches out when he has something for me. It's like, hey, how can I, help? And so it's the same thing for someone just trying to get in, is build your network, find people that are really, truly willing to mentor you and give you real advice. Even though they may not have direct work experience with you, but be willing to be a reference for you and be able to talk to someone about you. Because you can say, yeah, I've been talking to this individual for the last 6 months. This is what they've done in terms of expanding their knowledge and, digging deeper in terms of this market or this technology or, this space. They went on and did some LinkedIn learning sales skills. Those things, they don't matter. Those are the things that can separate you and kind of put you apart. Because at some point, someone's going to say, you know what? I see you hustling. I get this is a risk, but I'm going to take a chance on you. And I'll give one example. And he wasn't, in my opinion, I don't think he was a big risk, but he was an individual, no industry experience, but had a lot of experience in the lab, ran a whole department of, 50 plus people underneath him he managed, but also started several ASCs and OBL labs, with doctors. So a lot of great experience, but no industry experience. And initially I got a lot of negative feedback from my leadership on, we don't know if he's the right person. He's kind of a risk. And I said, no, I believe in this guy. Let's hire him. Came on board. Within maybe 9 months, the sales rep in one of the territories that he was helping cover as a clinical left. So we had an opening. He wanted the job. And I was like, and I told him, I said, there's no way I'm going to get you past the next level. And regardless what I think of you, I'm not going to get you approved to hire. Told him no. Came back, with a business plan, walked through it. Good business plan. Told him no again. And, again, we were struggling finding good quality talent too in terms of, but then again, came back, a third time. I think I maybe even told him no a third time. And finally, we were at the point where I had enough conversations with my management team and said, hey, he is hustling. He is persistent. He hasn't gotten frustrated. He continues to, and he was running as a clinical, he was running the territory as a sales rep. So showing that he could do the job. And actually it was, we were having more success out of that territory with him doing. So ended up, was able to get him promoted to a sales rep within, I don't think it was his second year, but I think it was his third year. He was President's Club. And then he hit President's Club 3 years in a row and was number one on, multiple different products. They had a bunch of different products, but multiple different product lines. He was the number one rep. And so, it was more of, yes, he was the right guy to, one, challenge. And then two, he, to your point, had the grit to just keep coming back and find a way. And then he delivered. Yes. 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 No. Little chat GPT it, right? The, yeah. Yes. But I'll give you one example about myself on that kind of same thing was interviewing for a regional manager, a regional director job. And this was when I was having my 2-level cervical disc replacement done kind of right at the same time. And I was like, I don't want to push this off. And I knew when my surgery was, I knew when the final interview was. The final interview was going to be a 5.5-hour panel interview where at the end of it, I had to give a 30-minute presentation on basically a made up scenario of what I would do to, take on this new team and all the challenges they had. And so 4 days after my surgery, I flew to Atlanta from Texas, after 2-level disc replacement. I had, a little patch over where the scar, you still see the scar. I remember, I'm in my suit. I have my, presentation ready, but as I get there, one of the VP of sales was someone that I knew and I'd worked with, and just, said, had some highs and hellos. And he goes, oh, what did you do? Cut yourself shaving? And I said, no, actually I had a 2-level disc replacement done just 4 days ago. And he's like, should you even be here? And I say, this is important to me. I said, I'm ready and let's go. And he goes, man, you might be crazy. I said, hey, you got to be crazy to do this job. I knocked it out of the park. The presentation was solid, got the job. Yeah, I was went home and it's celebrated quietly. Yeah. It is funny and I look at, okay, what's the leading technology that's available at the time to allow me to preserve motion and allow me to continue to enjoy the things that I want to enjoy. Because, fusion's always an option, even my lumbar, but I was like, no, don't want to get fusion. I want to preserve my mobility. And that was why I found a way to get into a clinical trial. There's a continuation portion, but got the disc, got the, these, and I'm very active and keep working out, and people are probably thinking, there's, remarkable in terms of what you can still do if you put in the effort. Yep. Yep. No, it's but that's that's all part of it is trying to keep this thing all together. Yes. No, that's great. Yeah, thank you.